Hello and what's up, political peeps? Per usual, I am your host, Arif Kapoor, and I welcome you back to another great episode of the Geopolitical. Happy New Year, first of all, but tomorrow is a huge day in United States history. It's the beginning of the 119th United States Congress. All the new senators and representatives that were elected in November will be coming and joining the current House and Senate. But before we do that, and before anything can happen in the U.S. House of Representatives, the House has to elect a Speaker of the House of Representatives. And as many of you know that hasn't been that easy of a task, particularly since what happened with Kevin McCarthy in January of 2023, when it took a whopping 15 votes for him to get put into office. 15 different ballots across 4 session days, and ultimately he was put into office, but that only lasted until October of 2023 because ultimately the way that he got into office was not the best. He essentially made promises to the Democrats and the Republicans to earn votes from them, and he also promised something called a motion to vacate rule, which means that instead of, like in previous speaker administrations, like under the Pelosi speaker administration in the U.S. House, it would take an entire caucus and multiple people to vote for the motion to have the office of the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives to vacate, to bring that to the floor. It would have to pass through many different representatives and it would have to get larger approval. But with McCarthy's new rule that he promised, so it was essentially a way of saying to the Republicans, like, okay, just please trust me. If you don't, here's an easy way to kind of kick me out-ish. So it was kind of a sneaky way for him to get into office and for him to make his way into speaker and then kind of go from there and piggyback off his promises. But he made promises to both sides for things like the budget and things like immigration. So that's ultimately what led to his downfall, because in October of 2023, Florida Representative Matt Gaetz took that privilege that Kevin McCarthy gave him, and filed a motion to vacate the seat of Speaker of the House of Representatives, and ultimately that worked, and the seat was vacated in October. And in this time only 4 ballots, Mike Johnson was elected with a 220 vote majority out of the 215 needed against Democrat Majority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, and he's been the Speaker, and he's been working with President Trump a lot, as President Trump has kind of weighed in to the House more and more. We have seen that, for example, in that whole government shutdown fiasco where people were like, oh my God, there's going to be a government shutdown. That was because President Trump and Elon Musk, respectively, were being like, yo, Republicans, like particularly the farther right ones, and Mike Johnson, please don't do this budget. Please, like, hold the budget. And because of that, Mike Johnson urged the Republicans to kind of not vote and stop the vote for the budget, which ultimately resulted in that whole like fiasco about the government shutdown. And because of that, and because of how Mike Johnson has worked with President Trump in situations like that one, President Trump was talked about his endorsement for Mike Johnson on New Year's Eve in Mar-a-Lago, and then he previously endorsed Mike Johnson in a long paragraph about his time in office and the Republican Party on social media. But now that we're at the start of a new Congress, it's not as simple as it was in 2022 of the 118th Congress. They took all the way until January 7th. The House usually convenes at the first day of the Congress on January 3rd. They took all the way until January 7th, but that really won't work because, as you know, the presidential inauguration is January 20th this year, and the House still has to approve the electoral vote. Because although we saw those CNN projections and the Fox News projections, nothing's official till January 6th, when the votes are officially counted by the U.S. House of Representatives, and those can only be done if there's a speaker to organize everything. So we can't trail this election on between Mike Johnson and Hakeem Jeffries and any other candidates for the 2025 119th Congress Speaker of the House, because otherwise it will delay the vote on who would become the next US president, although it's kind of certain, it's not official. And that's what the protests were on at January 6th. The protesters were attacking the Capitol for their vote because they didn't think the votes were fair, and they didn't think that the votes that were being put up by the House of Representatives on behalf of the electors were correct nor fair. Now, back to the Speaker election. Although President Trump did endorse Speaker Johnson, like I mentioned before, it will be a very tight race because the Republican majority in the House has gotten smaller. Despite the Republicans winning the majority in the Senate and winning the presidency, their House majority has shrinked, and because of that, they'll have an even closer race than it was after the 4 ballots last time. Which, by the way, we think 4 is a very little bit compared to 15, but that's rather uncommon. Generally, most of the time it happens just in 1 ballot. So having 4 and 15 just shows how close and how divided the House of Representatives is. But regardless, that means that if all the Democrats vote for Speaker Jeffries if all the Democrats vote for Representative Jeffries and then Speaker Johnson gets all the Republican votes, yes, he will win. But he only has one GOP vote that can leave him if he wants to be elected Speaker once again. That means if all the Democrats vote for Jeffries and more than one Republican doesn't vote for Mike Johnson, votes for a third party candidate, or even votes for Hakeem Jeffries, Mike Johnson will not be able to be the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Now, Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky's 4th Congressional District, kind of accused Mike Johnson of not being realistic with President Trump, particularly because of the great relationship, how Trump has kind of used Mike Johnson to put his weight into the House of Representatives, along with his allies like Elon Musk, like we were talking about earlier. And because of that, Thomas Massie does not want to vote for Mike Johnson because he thinks that he's too unrealistic with President Trump, and he thinks that essentially Mike Johnson is scared to be legit with President Trump, and because of that, there won't be a good relationship between the legislative and executive branch. Now, I'm definitely going to do a follow-up episode on this, so let me know kind of how you would like me to frame it, if you would like me to frame it in this talk way, more presentational style, but this will definitely be an election to keep an eye on. I personally don't think it's going to happen in 1 ballot, because given the past 2 Speaker elections haven't came close to happening in 1 ballot. And if, for example, somebody like Thomas Massie, who's pretty far right, doesn't decide to vote for Hakeem Jeffries, but votes for a third-party candidate, that will make achieving the majority of the votes pretty hard. So because of that, it's going to be a race that I'm definitely going to watch. 12 noon Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. You can watch it on C-SPAN, or other news networks will be broadcasting the floor of the House of Representatives for the Speaker election. And then after this, we'll be looking at the elections for other leaders in the House of Representatives and Senate. So the Senate President pro tempore will be elected. Probably it will be a Republican. It won't be Patty Murray anymore, the senior senator from Washington. A Republican would most likely take the office of President pro tempore. Currently, Kamala Harris will preside over the Senate only until January 20th, when her position will be replaced by new Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. And there's going to be many changes because of the majority and the trifecta, and we'll really see how policy plays out and how much President Trump and the executive branch and his cabinet and his other staff affect the House of Representatives and affect the legislative branch of our government as a whole. So you guys know the drill. Like, subscribe, comment. Thank you so much for listening or watching, depending on what platform you're on. Really appreciate your time. Let's watch out for those election results. Peace out, political peeps.